Welcome back, everybody. As you would know, today is the final day of this workshop. Let me just share my PPT and then we will start. Today, as you all know, we are going to discuss figures. Yesterday, we discussed tables. But before I begin with the session, I just want to say a few things. As you all know, this is the final session today. After today's session, the second part of the session would be a post assessment uh, session where I would give you certain questions. I have these 4 or 5 report writing topics which I thought I would share with you, and then you have to write an entire report of about 300 words and submit it on my email ID. You already know that you would be issued certificates of this workshop only if you uh, submit your post assessment. So your post assessment would be graded uh, and it would be compared with your pre-assessment, and then you would be given certificates. Apart from this, we will also give you a feedback form. You are supposed to fill it, which would tell us whether you like the workshop or not, or what aspects of the workshop did you like the most. So that feedback form would not take more than 2 or 3 minutes. So I believe that we would conduct it at the last hour, and it would take very less time. Do keep your notes with you, because when you are writing your report, you would need to refer to them. I'm sure that you have by now studied every aspect of report writing, and it would be quite easy for you to create a report just by consulting those notes. So I will give you 5 minutes to revise those notes also towards the end. So you can just quickly revise the notes and then come back and write the report. Apart from that, we did tables yesterday, so I wanted to just remind you what all we did yesterday. So if you remember, first was, we started with describing what is a table. Then we studied what are the guidelines or principles that we have to take care of while we are creating tables. A major challenge is not only creating table, but also reading them. So why we are talking about tables and figures in this workshop is because we want to emphasize on the importance of a full reading capability in a reader, in a student. A scholar can become a writer only when a scholar becomes an effective reader also, right? So it is very important to understand the importance, the significance of these various kinds of illustrations and diagrams that you keep coming across in your daily readings, right? So when we studied tables, as you would remember, we also, I shared with you, I can hear some noise. So I shared with you different types of tables. So simple table, complex table, how one table differs from another, and how you can produce a table, create your own table by taking care of a few things. I had also shared an activity with you at the end. I am not sure how many of you did it, but do share it with me as soon as you get time. We see a weekend coming up, so maybe that will give you enough time to focus on these few activities. Starting with figures now. Figures, when you will always see these two words together, tables and figures, in the list of contents of any paper. Tables I have already spoken about sufficiently. Today I'm going to tell you what are figures. Now, figures generally can mean illustrations of any kind, photographs, drawings, flowcharts, graphs, maps, and diagrams. Now, when we are speaking about illustrations, I'll just go one by one to give you just a one-line meaning of each of these. Basically, illustrations can encapsulate each one of these. Illustrations basically means anything which has any word, which has been any argument, which has been illustrated with the help of certain visuals. Still, when we speak about illustrations here, why I have noted this word down as a separate entity is because a lot of times as students of literature or business writing, you would see illustrations can be very, vague. It's very difficult to say, you draw something in order to communicate a message, and it's very difficult to say whether it is a graph or a chart. In that sense, it becomes an illustration. Literature students, for example, usually, when we speak about literature, when we discuss literature in classes, you would see we resort to philosophy, we resort to sociology, archaeology. When we are making all those discussions, a lot of times, you must have seen there's a circle. In the circle, there's a man written in words, and then there's a universe depicted through the circle. Inside the universe, there is man as an entity of this universe, forever lost but forever there. Such images fall under the category of illustrations. It is difficult to say what other category they would fall under. Then we have photographs. Today, a lot of researchers, whether we are speaking about literature writers or we are speaking about writers that belong to fashion industry or who belong to interior decoration industry, photographs are used quite extensively. Photographs, you already know, are taken by camera. That is the difference between a photograph and a painting, or the photograph of a painting, right? Photographs are today included in narratives, in research projects, in research writings, because they add value and credibility and a forceful argument to what you are saying. When you use photographs, first, it breaks the continuation, the monotony of the written word, and adds some spark to it. Second, it brings a little more credibility. In a lot of, for example, say we are discussing the pervasiveness of fixed gender roles in society. If I have to explain this in my research work, my research work would become more effective when I say add a photograph of an advertisement where a woman is shown in the kitchen and the man is shown on the dining table having food while the woman is cooking. I can also include a photograph of my own house with gender roles very pervasive. I can take a photograph of past books which have been published. The book covers say how they depict gender roles. Photographs thus can be very extensive. The sources of photographs can be extremely extensive, and that is how photographs can add value to a work. These days, I have also seen a lot of researchers use pictures of paintings. You study the impact of the history of imperialism, the history of colonialism, how various, say, French travelers or English travelers used paintings to disseminate a certain kind of knowledge about the East in the Western world. You see photographs of paintings used in such books which use this argument, right? Then our drawings. Drawings are usually, today, of course, they are made through softwares, but you can see that drawings are something that is made by hand. You can make a picture, a doodling. There are so many sources today which are used in order to communicate with a reader. So I see a prevalence of doodling, for example. There are so many kinds of comic descriptions which are used, or cartoons directly which are used. Other than that, there are graphical portrayals. You must have heard the name of graphic novels, which is an advanced, sophisticated name given to comics. Those are also in a way created through doodling effects or drawing effects through softwares. I have this mistakenly written flowcharts and charts as a separate thing, and I excuse me for that. Charts and graphs are again two ways through which we can communicate a piece of information through statistical observations and analysis. Maps do the same thing. Today, in a lot of researches, you would see an inclusion of maps. If I have to speak in connection to literature, then you read anything on Israel and Palestine, you would see two kinds of maps which existed before the 1948 Exodus, and the maps which came later, where you don't see Palestine at all on the map. These ways, maps are also used to communicate and to add a better dramatic effect to the writing. Maps are not only used to show countries, maps can also be used to show road pictures, or maybe Google Maps are also used to illustrate certain points. For example, the division of land and water, right? So those are also used. Diagrams can again encapsulate a lot of things. Usually when we speak about diagrams, we are speaking about particularly scientific diagrams, but diagrams can be used as a title to mean all of these things as well. All right. But I have here added this word separately in order to mean these scientific illustrations that we usually read in scientific reports. Now, this is a repetitive slide. I used it because today we are specifically speaking about figures and not tables. So let's just give it a relook. Why do we need figures? And how can we plan when to use them? The first thing is, of course, to check the journal requirements. Yesterday also we discussed how every journal comes with its own do's and don'ts. Journals have specific requirements as to the font size, color combination, inclusion of some number of colors, some not. Those journal requirements have to be read properly. They have to be heeded to whenever you write a paper and then you send it for publication. Journal requirements, as I said, can relate to the font, size, color, how many number of graphs, where they should be placed. Certain journals would have a policy that they should be placed within the text. Certain journals might have the policy that they should be placed in the appendix section, or they can also be placed in the notes section. Now that depends on the journal requirements completely. Second is to decide which kind of figure would suit your purpose the best. When we are speaking about deciding a figure, what kind of decisions are you supposed to take? Whether it should be a graph, what kind of graph, a bar graph or a linear graph, whether a chart, a flow chart, or an organizational chart, or whether a photograph. Under photograph, you have so many categories. For example, whether it should be a poster or it should be a painting. Those are the decisions that you are to take. It's always best to decide which works best for you, which is the best expressive in that point, in that space, which expresses your idea in the best way. Because a lot of times what happens with photographs is that you have so many that you are lost in, especially this is for literature students plus students who probably might be working in doing their MBAs. When they write a report, since they are dealing with posters, images which are created all around every time, and they are fed to us on a regular basis, it becomes important to decide which one serves our purpose the best. Then is to choose, okay, I have covered this point, then position the figures in the most strategic part of the text. Yesterday, we had discussed how tables are to be positioned. Today, we will discuss how figures are to be positioned. They have to be positioned the same way, but we will still keep it for a separate discussion. Now, let's see what is what are graphs and what is the relevance of graphs and charts. So when we are speaking about graphs, we understand that graphs provide a visual impact to a research work, and they are the best way to communicate main findings of a study. Traditionally, if you see, graphs are used to, or we can say extensively, graphs are used to display trends or to group results, to show results in a grouped manner rather than in dispersed manner. Now, the purpose of a graph is to present data that is too numerous or very complicated, and therefore it cannot be adequately expressed through words in the form of, in the text part of the research. So it is always advised to use graphs or charts to fulfill that purpose. Because if you remember yesterday, I showed you this quote by Tufte, who says that graphical excellence is much desired in any scholar because it helps us to reduce ink, and much can be communicated with less use of ink, less use of space, and in a more visually impactful manner. So it's very important to use such figures, especially when you are doing some kind of an analytical or statistical research. So one is visual impact, but when we are speaking about visual impact, it is also very important to understand that things should not be done solely for the sake of visual impact. So there should be a meaningful inclusion of a graph or a chart. Then is to organize scattered or complex data. This is something I've just covered. When the data gets too complex for a reader to understand, the reader would lose interest in it. A data, first of all, provides the necessary break from the reading process. It adds the visual credibility, and it also adds, a statistical, reliability to your analysis, because when you look at a chart or a graph, you know that some kind of a serious survey was done, a proper data was collected. Otherwise, a reader might feel that the writer, the author, is speaking out of general observation, on the basis of general observation. So in order to break that disbelief that the reader might have, it is advisable to use graphs and charts. Then graphs and charts are also used for better comprehension of results. Since graphs study trends and patterns and growth and development of a certain phenomena, it is best form, they are also the best form of communicating results. The reader can himself or herself read what the data that you had collected, the survey that you had done, what it resulted into, all right, or what were its general results. It saves time and space. This by now we've all understood that it saves time and space. Next is it substantiates the arguments, in the sense that you have a supporting evidence for whatever you are saying. Say example, you want to tell the people that in the month of July or in the month of May, Delhi had the maximum amount of rainfall in comparison to the last 10 years. So when you show a proper graph or chart, whatever you may use for this, you might use a linear graph, say. So you are substantiating your arguments by giving a proper process, by sharing a proper process and sharing proper results. It shows that you have surveyed, that you have collected data, that you have used a certain methodology, and then you have reached a certain outcome. It translates numbers into shapes, making it more attractive. Then it shows trends. This I have already covered. Now let's study the format of a graph. This is very important. I understand that majority of us would not, might not be very comfortable with making a graph. In this place, I am not teaching you how to make a graph, but I'm simply sharing with you the various ways in which graphs can be used, how useful these graphs can become for a purpose. And then generally, very generally, we are discussing the types of graphs that can be used in studies, only to make us aware and conscientious what is going around in the world. So talking about the format of a graph, now, first of all, you have to understand that there are very sophisticated computer programs that today assist us to make a graph. Graphs, therefore, can be constructed, created through the use of these softwares. A very commonly used software that I can talk about in this class is Google Forms. In later part of the session, I will tell you how by using Google Forms, you can create graphs very easily. So we will discuss that later. This I will tell you because you would learn how you can make your presentations, your NTCC projects more interesting by using this very easy feature, right? So let's look at the format of a graph. First of all, every figure or table must have a number. If your research is very extensive and you are using both graphs and tables, then graphs and tables will be numbered separately, which means if you are calling your table 1, you would call the graph 2. And then further, you can call your tables 1.1, 1.2, and you can name your graphs 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. So they are interdependently numbered. But if the research is small, it is just 2 or 3 pages long, and in that you are using one table and one graph, then probably you can simply go on following a consecutive chronological procedure. Then there is a title. By title, we usually the word that is used for a title in a graph is a caption. Now, please don't confuse it with the caption that we had studied yesterday. Yesterday, caption in a table means column caption, column heading. But here the caption, the word caption, you would keep reading about it when you are reading about graphs. The word caption here means the little, description that you give about the graph. Now, the description of a graph is usually very descriptive. It has to be, with the lesser number of words, but then also it can go on for 2 or 3 sentences. So that is called a caption. In a graph also, you use a head note. A head note means units and measurements. Head note is not a separate column in graphs. In graphs, there are no columns and rows. Graph is a pictorial description. It has a proper format divided in X and Y variables. So here, when you use head notes, you are simply writing or cm in some part of the graph. That can separately be called a head note, but it is not a separate column. Then is data, whatever data you have. Now graphs, since they come in so many forms, you have so many kinds of graphs, it's difficult to say in what form that data would be, but mostly the data is in the form of figures and numbers. Then is x-axis. You know what is an x-axis? X-axis is the horizontal line that you have, which usually it represents the independent variable, and then you have a y-axis, the dependent variable, which is the vertical line. Then there is a legend. A legend in a graph is extremely important. Now, if there is a graph, which is, say, we are talking about a linear graph where one line is in red and the other is in green. So you're using these 2 color codes. Now, what do you do here? How would the reader know what the red line stands for and what does the green line stands for? Because generally you are reading, say, the example that I was giving earlier also, say you are reading the amount of rainfall comparing it to the rainfall which happened in the last 10 years, say, right? So how do the readers know what does the red or green line stand for? In that case, you use a legend, which is a small box which you place either below a graph or just side by side within the graph width. That is a legend. I will just show you the picture of a legend and it will clarify. Just remember that there is something called a legend. Then there is a credit or source line. As yesterday also we studied, that it is very important always to use a source line, because a lot of times your graphs or any other kind of figure could be simply borrowed from another piece of research. In that case, it is extremely necessary to include a credit or source line, because you do not want to end up getting charged with plagiarism, right, in your research. Now, when we speak about principles of making graphs, can somebody tell me generally, since we have studied tables also now, and we have studied the principles of making tables, what do you think are the principles of making graphs? Can somebody respond? It's a very simple question. Suppose you want to make a graph. What things would you keep in mind when you to create that graph? Very simple question. I have asked you, when you create a graph, what are the basic things that you have to keep in mind while creating a graph? Very simple things, like it should be this, it should be that. What are the things that you take care of when you decide I have to include a graph and then you sit down to create it?
I think you need to, if you draw a table, I think for the first thing that you need to understand is, okay, what data what data you are going to include in column and what data you are going to include in rows.
Okay, but we are talking about graphs specifically. So you will decide what has to be on the x-axis and what has to be on the y-axis, right? Very simply. All right.
Yes, ma'am, you are right.
Yeah. So then you decide what should be the title. Since the title has to be descriptive and it should be very clear, you decide the title as well. These are simple things.
Yes.
But what I'm asking you is even simpler than this. Okay, so let's talk about it. The first principle of creating a graph is clarity. It should be clear. If your graphs end up complicating the problem or complicating the analysis, then the role of a graph would become destructive rather than being constructive. When we say clear, we are using this word in a wide range. Clarity means using clear demarcation of colors. If you are using colors, it means if you are not using colors, but say you have a bar graph and you want to demarcate one bar from another, so what kind of designs are you using inside it? Those have to be very, people should be able to distinguish between those. So it has to be clear in that sense. It has to be clear in the sense that your whatever you label, your labeling of y axis and x axis, that has to be very clearly demarcated so that the readers find sense in it. Other than that, the data that you have created and then the way you exhibit it in the form of graph, that has to be proper, clear, proper font size. I will share the font size and everything with you, though it differs from journal to journal, but generally I will share with you what is the most acceptable form. Then it has to be precise, accurate, and reliable. This is something we discussed yesterday also, that all tables and graphs deal with numerical figures or with exact data details. So it's very important to be precise. If you are, say, yesterday, if you remember, we were speaking about the cost of printers. So you have to be exact with the cost there, or with the with any other details of the printer, because now when you are making a table or a graph, you are dealing with facts. You are not dealing with just observations. So it's very important to make your graphs precise, accurate, and reliable. Readability is same as clarity here. Readability, if your content is clear, it would enhance readability. Readers would be able to understand the graph. Graph cannot be understood independently. It needs certain amount of analysis by a writer, and therefore that analysis should be very clear, and your graph should coincide with your writing. It shouldn't be that your writing is saying something else and your graph is saying something else. So you have to ensure that whatever you are saying through your text can also be illustrated, can aptly be illustrated through the graph. Then time and space effective. This is basically a benefit of graph, that it is time and space effective. You can make it further time and space effective by using the right kind of graph. When you use the wrong kind of graph, now this study can be very elaborate, learning how to use the right kind of graph, but everything comes with practice. And therefore, when you are really in the need of, in that process where you go on a survey, you create a questionnaire, you create a methodology of how to collect data, at that time you would begin to learn how to create the right kind of graph also. So this is a process that that one has to follow when time comes. But what you have to understand right now is why it is necessary to learn about these things. So it is time and space effective. It is important for you to choose the right kind of graph. When you decide to include a graph, and when you sit down to make one, it's important to choose what kind of graphic details or color combinations you want to use. It's very important not to make your representations extremely gaudy, because research is a very sophisticated kind of writing and you cannot make it look like a painting. Then is essential information only. You include everything that is essential. You might have, during your research, during your survey, you might have included a lot of variables, but when you create a graph, you have to choose what expresses the phenomena best. Then consider providing list of figures, tables, and plates at the front of the document, and immediately after the table of contents. When you write a research paper, there is a table of contents. In most of the writings, you must have seen, if you read a lot of books, you must have seen that after, just as the table of content stops, you see list of figures and tables given below. If a particular research work is using a number of maps or photographs, or say charts or graphs or tables, then they would definitely give you a proper list of those tables, so that in case, once you are done with the book and after a year or after 2 months you want to go back to it, where I have to locate that particular graph that caught your attention the first time. Otherwise, also, it's always easier for a reader to navigate through the list if there is a proper page number given. Label all visuals. This is something we covered in the last slide also. It's important to number and to label the graph. By labeling, we mean x-axis, y-axis, x-axis, everything has to be properly labeled. Whatever elements you are including, whatever number of bars you are using, they have to be properly labeled. Then strategically placed within the text and publication guidelines are important. Now, for example, this is the picture of a graph. If you look at this picture, now again, I'll move my cursor here. This is, say, the title or the caption of the graph. This is y-axis and this is x-axis. Again, it's properly labeled. This labeling is very important. They've written Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and then they've also said what Q stands for. Then there is sales in units is the head note. Sales is the labeling of this y-axis, and in units is the head note. As I said earlier also, don't confuse tables with graphs. In tables, there is a separate head note, a separate row for it. But here it is just stated along with the label of the x-axis or the y-axis. Then this is a legend. This is called a legend. This legend can be placed below a graph as it is in this picture, or a lot of times it is placed here at this point. Okay, so that is how it is placed. Whenever you see maps, you know, when we were kids, we used to study maps from where do Indian rivers go, or the location of Indian railways. So they were always different. There was a legend where we could see which is the line which connects the major roads, which are the auxiliary roads of in the country. So this legend describes a lot of what is going on in a graph. Very important detail, therefore. Right? So this is the picture of a graph. Let's move on to the next slide. Now here I am communicating the guidelines of a graph. By guidelines, I simply mean what are the things that you have to take care of. Precision, clarity, everything is there. But what about the details? How to get that precision? How to get that clarity? So here I have included a slide on that. So when we speak about graphs, if both graphs and tables are used, organize the data properly. See what would come first, what analysis would come next. So everything has to run chronologically, which is why planning a research paper and structuring it is very important. Today, working on the computers has given us an edge over, in comparison to old times when people had to tear off pages of pages in order to be coherent and smooth and well structured in their research. Today, we can only jump to a particular space and add whatever we want to add there with single click. Copy, paste, cut, paste. So it's become easier to organize data today, and therefore such data has to be very wisely structured. I have already said that when you bring graphs and tables together, it is important to number them independently. Okay, so that is very important. Every figure and table included in the paper must be referred to from the text, which means if you have a table there, it has to be mentioned in some analysis. So suppose you have a table called 11.1, but you never talked about it. It means that it is irrelevant to your research. You cannot include such a table just for the sake of it, or you cannot miss talking about the table. All right, a table or figure. Similarly, if you have talked about a table or a figure, but you do not refer to it, then also your analysis becomes insufficient and incorrect. So it's important to have that, collaborative process complete, where you have a figure and you have the mention of that figure somewhere in the text, and you have a table and you have the mention of the table somewhere in the text. Clear, brief, but descriptive legend. Figure legends are always left justified. Okay, so you have a box, you make a box, in the box you put different colors, you tell what those colors stand for, everything would be left indented. Okay, why this is important? Because most of the times we have the habit of indenting everything in the middle. So these are certain things that one has to remember, though it's not important to really keep them in your memory for a long time, because anyway, when you are going to write a research paper, you would keep the publication's guidelines in front of you. So such things will be taken care of. But the only thing is that I am making you aware of the kind of places, the sort of places where your research writing can go wrong. Okay, so use a font one size smaller than the body text of the document and be consistent throughout the document. I would not read the first part of the sentence here, but I would like to read the second part. Why not the first part? Because first part again depends on the publication instructions. The publication might ask you to use a very small size for the graph in comparison to the size of the text. Completely depends on the publication guidelines. So yes, but what is important is to be consistent throughout the document. If you have used a certain font for headings or a certain font for captions and a certain font for the rest of the details, follow that consistently. Do not change it midway. Then if you are using symbols, it's very important to add a key. What are symbols? For example, there are certain graphs where you use say triangle symbol or a box symbol or a circular symbol, a circle symbol. So in symbol, in that case, you have to give a key. Key is again a sort of a legend, we can say, where you are detailing that the small triangle stands for this and the circle stands for that. All right. So this is a key. Ensure that there is a fair amount of white space around the visual. So visuals should stand out on its own. It should look attractive. So it's important to leave a bit of white space around so that when the reader looks at the graph, at this visual picture, so the reader is attracted to it and finds comfortable reading it. Then is how to refer to a table or a figure. This is something that I talked about in quite a detail yesterday. So I don't think I have to really repeat it, but I'll just I have added a point here which I wanted to speak about, and that is this last point: abbreviation of the word figure. This is a very important point. By now you already know how you have to place a figure or a table in a text. If you remember, I told you that you refer to it, you ask the reader to see figure 1.1 or something like that. You do not interrupt your passage, you do not interrupt your argument, you just give your analysis and share the results, and you go on with it, and you leave it to the reader, who would then choose whether whether he or she wants to go through that particular table or not. So I would not go into those details, though I've given certain examples on the page, but I will come to this point: abbreviation of the word figure. When referring to a figure in the text, the word figure is abbreviated as fig, F-I-G, dot. While a table is not abbreviated, it remains table. Photographs are labeled as plates. There are very few research papers where I have seen photographs being labeled as plates. So most of the times photographs are also seen as figures, and they are simply the detail would say figure FIG dot 11.11 or whatever. So they don't use the word plates really, but since it is an information that needed to be imparted, I'm just sharing it with you. Now, this is a very important kind of questions that can come to your mind when you are creating graphs, when you are including them in your study. There are certain questions that came to my mind, and I sort of just putting them across so that we have ready answers to those. Now, every author might have to decide if figures should be big or small. Now, since we were speaking about the size of the figures, how large or how small the graphs should be, here again, it's important to say that though the font size will be decided by the publication in most cases, still there might be areas where you will choose to decide what font you have to choose, you want to have. In that case, it is best, as mentioned earlier, to choose a font size one font smaller than the rest of the document, which means you choose say 12 for your text, then you can choose 11 or 10 for the graph. Remember that graph should be legible, it should be readable. So scholars should not face a problem in reading the graph. They should not have to take a magnifying glass to read the graph. So it's very important to maintain a proper font size and then be consistent with it. If you have chosen to draw your maps in say 11 size, then maintain that size. Then if they should be colored or not. Now graphs can be created in two ways. You can either add a color to them or you can add designs in them. For example, you know, when one line has to be distinguished from the next line from, say, bars, some would, in one bar you can make a box kind design, in another you can make diagonal lines, then you can make circles. You can choose any any of those designs. But in a lot of works, people choose to color the graphs. Now, if they should be colored or not, what should be the appropriate answer for it? In most cases, researchers are asked not to color the graphs. There are quite a few reasons for it. First of all, there are a lot of readers who might be color blind. In that case, it becomes very challenging for the readers to distinguish between those lines. And when we speak about color blind people, you know that there might be a lot of people who have that problem, or a color that looks pink to you might look peach to somebody else. So there are sometimes differences in the way we see colors. So in most cases, people would say, researchers are asked not to color the graphs, but to differentiate them in some other way. But if you have to, it is suggested not to choose more than 5 colors. And what I found really startling and surprising was that in some research works, the writers had written not to combine red and green color because these are most difficult to distinguish for people who cannot see differences in colors. So this is, since I was not very sure of this information, I have given the source. You can go and check. What should be the legend width? You know what is a legend by now? Legend width should be, it should match with the figure length. So whenever you add it, wherever you add it, mostly it is added at the bottom of the graph. So you would make it equal to the size of the x-axis, right? So what style to follow if there are more than one graphs? Now, when you are using multiple figures, you have to make sure that your style is consistent, whatever style you can choose. Style is not a problem here, but you have to maintain uniformity. That is all. Can two interrelated graphs or charts be directly compared? Yes. A lot of times when you are comparing information, what you can do is you can put two graphs side by side and compare them. You can put one table and one graph side by side and compare them. Yesterday, I shared with you a PDF file in which I showed you how the writer had put two graphs side by side, one after the other, because she wanted her readers to understand how one is happening due to which the other thing is happening, a cause and a result of that. So they can be placed together. Now, very quickly, I would like to cover the graphs, the types of graphs that exist. Now, this is a bar graph, which this here uses a lot of bars, as you can see on the screen. Let me first tell you what are the types, though we've already discussed, but here I have mentioned them one by one. This is the title, the undergraduate student enrollment in the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. Then this is a descriptive title for y-axis. You can call it labels. Then here you see what is the most distinguishing factor in a bar graph is, and how it is distinguished from other graphs is that the bars are not touching one another. So that's a remarkable difference here. And then what you see here is that the study is done by noticing the height, the frequency. The number on one side, you see number of students, and then you see how in what courses they are enrolled. All right. And then this is the descriptive title for x-axis. Second graph that I'm sharing with you here is the line graph. Just look at the picture and see, you can, of course, the difference is very clear. Here we have bars and here we have lines. Now, a line graph is used when a writer wants to show, say, changes that happen over a period of time, right? So where bar graphs show data with blocks of different lengths, for example, here you see data is shown through different lengths, which or lengths represent frequency. Here you have proper growth, trends changing. They are rising trends and they are falling trends. All right, so in that case, a line graph is used. Line graph is very extensively used to study the growth or the development or certain kind of trends that are happening around, whether those are trends are the rising COVID cases or the falling COVID cases or the rising death cases or the rising accidental cases. All those are studied with the help of a line graph. This is a picture I took from yesterday's newspaper, which shared the statistical analysis of COVID cases which are active in Noida and Ghaziabad. So if you take a look on the newspaper, you would see there are n number of graphs shared every day in the newspaper, which shows us the relevance of graphs in research works. Histogram falls under the category of a chart. It is, as you see here, it's remarkably different from a bar graph. In a bar graph, you must have noticed there are bars which are which are placed at a distance. In an histogram, you would see these are quite closely. They actually touch, the bars touch each other. So that is how it is visually different from a bar graph. As far as its use is concerned, it is very different from a bar graph. Histogram study range and frequencies, while on the other hand, bar graphs just make a comparison. After that, we have scatter plots. Scatter plots, you will see just dots on them. This is a scatter plot. You can take time to read these bars, because here you see a proper illustration of every part, which is every element which has been used in order to create the graph. So here they are comparing the relationship between scores on exam 1 and exam 2. So here they have used this the scatter. This is called a scatter plot. This is also called a scattergram or a scatter graph or a scatter chart. So in a scatter plot or a chart, you use dots to represent values of two different variables. So here you see dots, all which stand for two numeric variables, and the position of each dot on the horizontal and vertical axis indicates values for an individual data point. So this is a scatter plot. Again, yes, it takes time to learn the graphs, and it also takes time to understand which graph you would prefer while you are creating a paper, when you're writing a paper. But all this comes eventually when you first point is, of course, data collection. So we'll talk about data collection in a while. Let me go to the next slide. Now, this is organizational chart. Organizational charts are also used extensively in business reports, particularly where you want to show hierarchies and relationships of power in an organization amongst staff members. In that case, you use an organizational chart. Next is a flow chart. Flow chart, since now we have this whole having graphics and using graphics has become very easy. So you can have a number of ways in which flowcharts are constructed or created. This is just one example of it. Then flowcharts are also created in this way. If you see the details in your PPT, also the way you can create flowcharts, you would be surprised to see there are n number of ways of creating flowcharts. This is the traditional method of creating flowchart. Flowcharts, as you know, are created when you want to show a process for something, to make it simpler for readers to understand and to follow it. In that case, you use flowcharts. A good thing about using flowchart is it is useful for analyzing or representing processes, but it can also become redundant if your procedures are longish and they are very complex. So like flowchart, every other bar graph or linear graph, each of these figures might have certain advantages and certain disadvantages. One has to decide, again, what suits their purpose the best. Okay, before I do these 2 or 3 activities with you, I would like to show you one, let me just This is a PPT which was sent to me by a student. Today only it happened that I was taking a BS presentation, and the students told me that they created a questionnaire, collected data, and then they converted it into graphs in order to study the need of education felt by the, I would say, the middle class and the poor people. So they created a video first, then they circulated the video in order to propagate a process through which people could respond to them. The people who felt were moved by the video, they sent them a questionnaire in which they included a number of questions with a number of options. This was a questionnaire, so it had to have options. And then they collected this data. Now this questionnaire was collected through the form of the Google Forms. So what I'm telling you by sharing this PPT with you is how the students used a ready-made method, that is the Google Forms, to generate results and to then create pie charts and graphs for it. So as I was telling you earlier also, today we have a lot of softwares which automatically would create charts for you or graphs for you. So things have become very easy. This is just one way of me showing you how this has become a very convenient practice, and therefore it can be included. And this is how you can make your class presentations or your NTCC projects attractive by having all these kind of statistical analysis in your works. So without any direction, without any guidance, the students happen to do it, and this was very nicely done. There are all these sorts of questions. They have made an observation. Overall, people believe religion and caste shouldn't be a medium to decide for right to education for a citizen. So they've made these observations, given colors, they have a percentage on the basis of which they decide what is the result. So this was a very good way of sharing results with the readers, with us who were listening, who were in the audience, right? So this is what I wanted to share. I can also share with you how.
I would like to ask something. May I?
Yes, Nihal.
Ma'am, in the previous two figures that you have shown, there is one section of people, there is one section which has shown 0 responses, right? So if we are doing a survey, if we are doing a big survey, so is it possible that a certain section of people will show no response? Don't you think it's a totally hypothetical situation? It's not possible in real life that.
Are you speaking about these charts?
No, ma'am, the previous one, the previous
two
charts.
One.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. No.
Yes, no.
Yes.
Maybe. Okay.
That the one that was showing middle class section was showing 0 data.
I can't see the 0 data, but I can answer this question. Now, what happens is usually if there is a 0 response for something, it is not included in a graph if it is made manually. But if it is being created by, say, a software, then it would be included. There are surveys or questionnaires where people would not respond to on a certain question, but mostly, pie charts are only created when you have a yes or no or can't say kind of questions. You have those kind of questions and pie charts are created. So in pie charts, there comes a possibility of having this no as an answer or 0 as an answer, which is not possible in other kinds of graphs. Have I answered you, Nihal, or was your question something else?
Ma'am, according to me, if you take a very small sample size, then it's a possibility that we may get 0 response. But but if you are doing a survey, on a larger scenario, then I don't think there is a possibility that we get 0 response from any particular section of society.
Right. Absolutely right. And that is why this is a small presentation by students. So I don't think they must have gone to more than 5 or 10 people. Right. So this is a very small survey, you can see. You understand? And why I'm sharing this with you is to show how effectively these tools can be used in our everyday lives to open our eyes to certain forms of knowledge, to certain forms of information, to make our presentations interesting, to make our analysis or understanding of things interesting. So say you want to work on an NTCC project on, say, yesterday, because Nihal, you used the example of Keats and Wordsworth. So you want to study the popularity of Keats in India, right? So maybe you choose certain sections of people around you, and then you have a survey on the basis of it. This survey can be anywhere between 15 to 100 to 500 people. The results will depend on the number of people that you choose to survey, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anybody else who wants to ask another question from ma'am? Please respond. Okay, so over to you, ma'am.
So there is an activity that I wanted to do now. Identify the type of graphs and charts. So just give me an answer. What type of chart do you think this is? This is a very small activity. Let's be done away with it very quickly.
Those of you who are not speaking at all, please give it a try. Don't worry. Speak something. Shivani?
Ma'am, it's a bar graph, I think.
It's a bar graph, and it's a horizontal bar graph. Usually bar graphs, we see them in a vertical manner, right? So here we see it in a horizontal manner, which is why probably
Yes.
confusing.
Yes.
Let's
Yes.
look
Here is we have just taken a liberty to show horizontally.
Yes. No, bar graphs can be done horizontally. Histograms cannot be done horizontally. There's a difference in what kind of graphs are allowed to be done. They are possible to be done horizontally, but what not. So there's a proper study behind it. Okay, which kind of graph is this?
Ma'am, histogram.
Very good, Bhavna. This,
Histogram, ma'am.
Ma'am, pie chart.
yes, this is pie chart. Now I move on to the second activity. Like yesterday, a few questions just to see how much we've learned from the activity. So what are the two things all graphs and charts require? Now you have to remember that there are n number of charts and graphs, scattergrams, for example, or pie charts or bar graphs. So which are the two things all graphs and charts require? Title, data, scales, and bars. Your answer can be more than one thing.
Title and data.
Data for certain.
Data for certain, yes. Who was this? A new voice?
This is Abhinav.
Abhinav, very good. Data for certain, and of course the title. Any graph obviously should have a title. Only then you would understand the meaning of it and what it is trying to tell you, right? Next question. Which type of graph shows size relationships between parts and whole? A very simple question. Scatter plots, line graphs, relationship between parts and whole, pie charts, or histograms?
Pie chart.
Pie charts. Good, Abhinav. Next is, which of the following statements is correct? All tables are graphs. Graphs are often created to save space and time. All graphs require scales. Okay, there are just three options.
Second option, ma'am.
Graphs are often created to save space and time. Good. Now, please remember time not of the writer, but of the reader. Yes, because the writer might have to spend a lot of time in collecting data and then creating a questionnaire, right? So this is for the reader. Identify the flaws in this graph. Can you identify flaws in this graph?
Ma'am, it is not mentioned what is on the y-axis and what is on the x-axis.
Yes, exactly.
There only numbers are given.
Very good, Bhavna. So anything and everything which can give direction to a reader that is missing from this graph. So we do not know what the writer is really, what does the writer really intend to do. We do know if we spend a lot of time on it, we might be able to ascertain what the writer is trying to say, but this is definitely not the right way of creating graphs. Now, this is a very interesting activity I had for you. I thought maybe let me just, yesterday, like we analyzed tables, I thought today let's analyze graphs. So this is a graph that you see in front of you. I'll ask you a few questions. You just answer me. I'll give you 5 minutes to read the graph first. So just read it. You can anyway read the graph alongside the question. So first question, which make of the car was most popular?
Nissan.
Nissan.
Yes, because of course the bar graph, the bar is quite clear here, right? Which two makes of cars sold 150 each?
Vauxhall
And
and
Vauxhall and Peugeot.
Peugeot.
Yes, yes. So you see the match in the bar. Which was the lowest selling make?
Jaguar.
Land Rover and Jaguar.
Lowest. Nihar, then
Okay, Jaguar.
Jaguar. Right. So now I move to the next activity, which is similar. Here, what you have to do, let me just move. Okay. So here you have a table. One thing I forgot to tell you is, whenever you create graphs, you would have to create a table first. So whenever because creating a table gives you an edge, you will understand now what you really have to do. You remember yesterday I gave you a parting activity. I asked you to create a table about how many people went for further studies, how many people went for study for the corporate job and all. So you create a table. That table then facilitates this whole process of creating a graph, because you have figures and numbers in front of you which have been put in separate sections. That demarcation of information then allows you to create a graph. You can also do it by using some software. So it's important to create tables. Why I'm telling you this? Because when you sit down to create a graph, you should know that first there is a need to create a table. Okay. So mostly this is a widespread practice. Now here you see one table and the other pie chart. Say this is my schedule. All right. So now you have to answer these questions. This is how I spend my 24 hours in a day, right? So, okay. So find out on what activity do I spend my maximum time on?
I'm sleeping.
Work.
Work is 8.5. I think Bhavna, you missed that. It is 8.5.
Oh, okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Sorry.
Right?
Yeah, ma'am.
So thankfully, I'm not sleeping most of the time. So I am working, right?
Yes.
Then I spent more time on meals than, now this is a true and false question. So please listen to me carefully. I spent more time on meals than travel and getting dressed combined.
Dress.
Yes, ma'am.
True or false?
True.
Yes, ma'am. True.
What is meals? 2.25. And what is getting dressed and travel? 1.75. And
by adding it, we will get
Yes.
1.8.
yes, so it is meals, which means eating. Then I spent less time watching TV than on doing my household chores. True or false?
False.
False.
Then what did I spend the least amount of time doing?
I'm getting dressed.
Getting dressed.
Okay, now tell me, which was easier to read, the table or the graph? The chart.
The chart, ma'am.
The
Ma'am.
table. Okay,
Ma'am,
Bhavna
table.
says table and Abhinav says the chart. Very interesting. But now there is something. Now I noticed just now, I hadn't noticed it earlier. But if you look at this graph independently, say, then there is something missing in this graph. What is that?
Yes, ma'am, it's not labeled.
It is not. Yes, Samya?
It's not labeled, ma'am.
Yes, there are no labeling, which means it lacks a legend. Now,
Yes,
in this
ma'am.
picture, the legend is missing because the table is there. But if you look at the graph independently, then you would need a legend, right? So these were the activities. Other than that I will take 5 minutes more. I wanted to talk about a few more things which are very important. when you are writing your research papers, this is one slide I wanted to add. Now we've studied about tables and graphs, but as I was saying that there are several other kinds of illustrations which are used in today's research papers, since we are, even as students of literature or business management or say computer science or fashion or interior decoration or fashion designing, whatever, you would see that when you write your research papers, your studies have become multidisciplinary, which means that you would have to go into areas which you had not expected to go into earlier. Your research articles have become more extensive, more expansive. Though you narrow down on one topic, but the proofs, the evidence that you collect, it could be from any source around, including media, movies, films, songs, then comic novels, graphic novels, or what should I say? There are so many resources, advertisements, printed advertisements, visual, digital advertisements, then advertisements online, advertisements on television. There is advertisements on, say, billboards, so there's an extensive range of information that you can analyze today. So apart from graphs and tables, you have posters like this, which you can include in your study. This is a poster which was a part of a research done on political prisoners in America. This research included a lot of posters where, the Amnesty International is trying to fight for the freedom of political prisoners who are mainly in America, those who are marginalized because of their race or their gender. So such research papers include not only these kind of posters, but posters where blacks, for example, are being stereotyped, advertisements where blacks are being stereotyped. So these researchers can include a lot of kind of photographs, posters, cartoons in order to analyze how people are being conditioned in America to believe that blacks are criminals. Then there are cartoons. This is a cartoon which was on Europe. This was a study on Europe, and this depicts how Europe has always been in, in public imagination. It has always been imagined as a woman, she. So this is a woman here preparing a cake for herself and celebrating her birthday, right? So these are the way cartoons are used. Cartoons are, of course, they bring amusement, they bring humor, they bring a little visual impact, they add a visual impact. Other than that, they are very important to communicate a pertinent message. The pertinent message here is how women are always imagined as, countries are always imagined as women. A lot of such research articles would include either doodles or such cartoons in order to communicate a very strong message. Why they include these cartoons? Because they are trying to tell us that how we are being fed certain amount of information on a daily basis, so much so that we begin to accept it without questioning it. So we don't challenge any stereotypes because we are being fed them through cartoons also, which are there just to amuse us. So we never anyway intellectualize them, right? Next is maps. I have already spoken about maps. A lot of studies today include maps. These maps could be about states, cities, roads, railway network, countries, borders, ocean, water bodies. These could be about anything. These maps are created to draw comparisons. I was doing a study on refugee camps in Morocco, Lebanon. So they had used maps in order to tell that how densely Lebanese boundaries have become, how densely populated Lebanese boundaries have become because of the influx of refugees from Palestine. So you get to, these maps have become an integral part of research works today. Then is photographs. Photographs communicate very strongly. Photographs today again become a part of any kind of research in literature, business management, fashion industry, especially photographs play a very important part. Photographs can be taken directly for a piece of study, or they can also be outsourced, which means you borrow them from an already available research, right? Photographs communicate, say, the pervasiveness of gender division, or poverty, or population, or how the garbage is increasing all around us, whatever. So photographs play a very forceful role. I have read a lot of researches where apart from photographs, this is a photograph, but apart from photographs, paintings are also used. I've already spoken about it earlier. So this is a photograph that you see in front of you, but the research that I'm talking about here, the Colonial Harem by Malik, it also included a lot of paintings, paintings that are made by traveling, say, French and British painters, who then depicted the Eastern world as a primitive world. So a lot of paintings. Any research work which compares, say, the work of Frida Kahlo and Amrita Shergill, that would also include a lot of paintings. So research works can include paintings, not only if they are concerned directly with paintings, but also when you want to speak about a certain feature in the painting. For example, I was doing a research on how blacks are depicted as servants, how widely blacks are depicted as servants in paintings that were painted by British painters, the European painters actually. So then I located a lot of photographs where always the black person was in the role of a servant, and how these paintings were then, they would travel around the world, they were bought by rich aristocrats, English aristocrats, and how then there was a stereotyped conditioning that blacks is equal to servants, that stereotyping. So since we are today in a phase of deconstructing knowledge, so it's becoming very popular method where people are going back into already available information and knowledge systems, and they are questioning them by writing about them, right? So that is why you use these cartoons, pictures, photographs, paintings extensively. Then these are diagrams. This was a study in Imperial Leather, a book by Mack and Clintock, where she compares, she shows that how a white man's evolution is shown through pictures and how a black man's evolution is shown through pictures. It was an extensive study on that. So I found it very interesting. I thought I should share one picture with you. So these are, so this is all I had for you.
Nivedita ma'am, if you may allow me, can I share the feedback form with the young students?
Yes, ma'am, definitely.
Yes. So I'm just sharing, dear students, I'm sharing this link with you, and within no time you can see it on your screens. So this is a Google form in which we have asked you to fill up the feedback of the 30-hour long sessions, different sessions held on various facets and aspects of academic writing. So I hope all of you can see it. Can you view it?
In the chat box?
Yes, it is in the chat box right now. And it is, it should be visible to all the panelists as well as the attendees. Yeah?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
It is visible. All right, that is a very good news. So dear students, we are giving you around 10 minutes to, fill up this form. It is very, very simple. And do let us know once you submit it. Okay, and then we shall go further with our next plan of action. All right, so which is your post-assessment and for which you've been waiting for so long. So do let me know once you are done with the, submission of the form.
Yes, ma'am, I have submitted.
Ma'am, I've submitted.
All right, Nehal, thank you. And okay, the rest also we would like to, hear from you. Once you are done, do let us know.
All right, I see that most of you have submitted now the feedback form. Thank you, everybody, for submitting. This is very important.
Is there anybody who's left? Is there anybody who's left or who cannot see or something like that? Yeah? Come on, come on, come on. All of you have submitted? Confirm?
Yes, ma'am, I have submitted.
All right, all right. Okay, fine. Thank you. Over to you, ma'am. Nivedita, ma'am, over to you.
Yes. So now we have, I was just reading some questions in the chat box, and Bhavna, you're asking if there is a time limit. Yes, there is a time limit. You have to submit this post assessment within, this session, because we have to then also take out the result, and then we have to distribute the certificates as well. So it's important to finish it now. When I said that you can submit something to me on the weekend, I meant the table that never came to me. No, you remember that table we did yesterday? So that never came to me. So I was asking students to just take out time to do that as well and send it to me. Generally, as a part of learning, not that you will be marked on the basis of it. You will be graded only on the basis of today's post assessment, nothing else. Okay, so please remember that. Okay, now I'm sharing the question with you. This is, you have to write a report on any one of these. Okay, any one of these. So I have given you a number of topics here because of you can choose your topic according to your interest and whatever information you have on a given topic. It is not necessary that you have to use tables and figures, but you may. If you want to, you can take a source, a table or a figure from any source, and you can then, you to give a credit line and everything, right? So these are the topics. Either you can write a report on rise of domestic violence or initiatives taken by various NGOs during the pandemic or the migrant crisis, or how the government ban on plastic bags is never successful and how it is damaging the environment. Any one, and you have to write this report in about 300 words only. You have good 30 minutes to write this report, so you can start.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you fill up the feedback form also or no?
No, ma'am. There's a form, ma'am. I will just check it, ma'am.
All right, and you can see this on your screen. You can choose any one of these topics and write a report, okay? So this is
Okay,
your
ma'am.
post assessment, right? So there's nothing to worry about. Go ahead.
Ma'am, so how much time will I get to write it and submit it, ma'am?
Till 4 o'clock, otherwise the session will stop, no? As you are aware. Every time, I think.
Yes, ma'am. So can I send it like after the session, because it's like 3:50 already and I just like logged back in.
I don't know. That depends on Dr. Nivedita Gupta, whether she will allow you or not. But yes, you can still start writing. Let us see. Yes, please.
Ma'am, I've submitted the form now. I was facing issues earlier, but I've done it now.
All right, all right. And what about the post assessment, Kirti?
Ma'am, I'm writing
This
it.
report writing?
Yes.
Good, good. Somebody's mic, I guess, is on. So you request you to please mute yourself. Thank you. Okay.
Ma'am, on which email ID we have to submit it?
Ma'am has already shared her
There is
email
no
ID
email
on
ID
chat.
mentioned.
Okay, hold on. I'll tell you. She's already shared ngupta12@amity.edu.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you see that? It's in the chat box.
Yes, ngupta12
@amity.edu.
Yes.
So guys, please hurry up.
Yes, ma'am.
It is 3:55 and exactly at 4 o'clock, sir is going to, stop recording. Okay, so we just have very, very few minutes here. All right. Please hurry up and do let us know as soon as you submit. So there is some message which is coming. Let me see what it is. Yes, ma'am has again posted her email ID. If anybody has missed on it, it is very much on the chat box. Please check. All right, since we have very less time with us and our session is supposed to end at 4 o'clock, so hence I take this opportunity to thank each one of you. All right. So as you know, we were there with you for last 15 days. That is 30-hour long sessions we all have conducted together. So we would like to, first of all, pay our gratitude to the founder president, sir, for giving us his vision, for sharing his vision with us that we need not just empower the students with academics, but also with skills. So this academic workshop is just a step closer to his vision. I also take this opportunity to thank our Chancellor, Sir, Dr. Atul K. Chauhan, for giving us such a powerful medium with which we could not only just connect to Amitians, but also to students outside Amity. And there are many students who have connected to us, like Nihal is from Patna University. Many of you are from Jaipur. So it was a very powerful medium which Sir has given us. So we are grateful to you, Sir, for making this discourse extremely meaningful. I would also like to thank our Vice Chancellor, Madam Dr. Balwinder Shukla, for giving us this chance to discuss with the young, ignited minds the utility or the importance, significance of research writing. Because as the time will pass, all of you will see yourselves indulging in one kind of research or another. So this is a great chance, great opportunity for each one of you to learn the nuances of academic writing. I'm also grateful to our HOI ma'am, Professor Vinita Prasad, for making this endeavor successful by making it possible for so many professors of AISR to share their insight, to share their valuable experiences with young minds like you. I am also grateful to my esteemed colleagues for making time, coming to this workshop sessions and sharing so much with you. That definitely added so much of flavor, so much of learning, so much of academic excellence. As I am the coordinator of academic workshop, I'm grateful to all of you, dear participants, who not only come from Amity, but who also hail from outside Amity, for making it possible, for making it so meaningful interaction. We really, really enjoyed talking to you, interacting with you, discussing with you. Perhaps that interaction has enriched us also as academicians, not just you. Last but not the least, I would like to give special vote of thanks to IT department for making this whole journey possible and without any technical glitches. So that interaction, that discourse, that kind of sessions, powerful sessions became even more effective by smooth functioning of IT. So thank you everybody for joining us, being with us every day from 2 to 4. Tomorrow I'm going to miss these sessions because I think I've become a part and parcel of it. So tomorrow I'm going to miss it actually very badly. So with that, I thank each one of you for being such a powerful medium, for being such a great audience. God bless you all. Take good care of yourself. Stay safe. Be happy. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, we would also like to thank you for organizing this powerful session, and I can surely guarantee I will surely remember this session for the rest of my life. Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, that is wonderful, wonderful, dear Nihal. And we will also miss you, Nihal, because we've been talking to you all this while. Okay, so be in touch.
Ma'am, thank you so much for taking out your time. Like all the faculty, as I'm a part of AIESR, I know most of the faculty, and it was really amazing knowing all of you from a different angle completely, apart from just the classrooms. And it was really nice and obviously very informative, and it is something that will help me even when I go for my further studies. So it's not just something that will help me in Amity, but further also. So like Nihal said, I'll definitely remember it for my life. Thank you so much, ma'am, and all the other teachers who took their efforts and spent their valuable time teaching us, because lockdown has been hard on for all of us. And even between the classes and everything, you took out the time and made sure to make a difference in our lives. So thank you so much for that, ma'am.
Ma'am, yesterday you told like you will tell us the name of the YouTube channel.
Nihal, I cannot tell you right now, as we are already going live. This is live webinar. So perhaps I will, since I have your email ID, I will mail you the URL by tomorrow. So I would request IT to help me out with that. Okay. So as you are aware, all 15 sessions are on air. We have gone live. We are on YouTube. You can watch us, but yes, we will be sharing the URL with you very soon. That is for sure. Okay.
Ma'am, can I end now?
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes. So guys, all of you take good care of yourself. Stay safe. God bless you all. So since we have no time left, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Nivedita Gupta, for being such a great resource person, you know. And your research definitely is going to make a lot of, change in the lives of these young students. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.